My name's Mark Whittle. I'm a performance and mindset coach. And today I'll spend most of my time coaching people one-to-one, typically CEOs of businesses who are driving purpose-built companies, athletes as well, who are professional in what they do, at the top of the sports they do, talks like this, events like this, and recording my podcast, the Take Flight podcast, regularly as well. That journey started 4.5 years ago. I was in Bishopsgate, over our shoulder over here, 4.5 years ago, and was called to do something different, called to create a podcast, and that's led me on this incredible journey over the last 4.5 years, speaking with some of the best athletes, entrepreneurs, and lifestyle specialists in the world, and then sharing those conversations with you, so you can take those insights and that knowledge into your own life and apply them as best fits. That's what we're going to do here this evening as well. So I'm delighted to introduce our amazing guest tonight, who's the CEO and founder of the industry-leading no-low alcohol company, Spencer Matthews. He's a former reality TV star who's been splashed across our screens for over a decade and incredibly inspiring in his own right with the physical challenges he undertakes. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Spencer Matthews. So, mate, it's been nearly 18 months since we last spoke. So what's been going on with you the last 18 months? What are the kind of standout things that have happened?
Whew. We're about to have our third child,
Okay.
which will be
Quite big.
three under the age of 4, which is very exciting. So life at home is pretty busy. Business is growing very well. We've been focused on US expansion. Had we launched in the US?
You were about to.
About to launch, yeah, so we can go into that. I did my first ultra marathon, so I did the Marathon des Sables, which was interesting. It was a very cathartic experience. And yeah, more of that to come, but ultimately, mate, just kind of head down, cracking on, you know?
Amazing.
I think it's very important in business in particular to do, things that you love doing. And I really enjoyed our last conversation. I can tell how much you love, what you do, and what we do at CleanCo is really important to me, and I love every minute of it. So, I think building a business and making, trying to help it grow as efficiently as possible can come with highs and lows, but mostly highs. So, no, it's been a really interesting time.
Before I ask my first question, I just want to ask something slightly, just what you said at the beginning. Third child on the way.
Yeah.
When's the due date?
Sometime in April. I'm not saying that to be ominous, but I just don't think we know.
Okay, how are you feeling about that?
Fine. It's having 2 kids. Well, being a father's great, right? I had you don't really know what to expect, and I feel very proud to be a father. I feel delighted to be married to my wife, and we have an amazing home life. I struggled with the balance of work and family. I think we spoke about that last time, but for the benefit of those that are here tonight, I think it's so important to try and get that right, and I certainly wasn't for a while. It's quite easy to become completely engrossed in whatever it is that your passion is at the time, and it was just, to answer your question, sorry, I always veer off. To answer your question, no, we're delighted. It's going to be a lot of work. There's no two ways about it. Having kids of a young age can be tricky.
Yeah, my wife is sat over there. We have 1, and we can't even think about talking about 2.
Perfect, Mrs. Whittle.
But yeah, look, mate, I feel very similar when we had our conversation. I absolutely loved it, and you're probably one of the ones I get asked the most questions about. Oh, what was Spencer Matthews like, given the TV appearances and a little bit of a reputation that came along with that. But I absolutely loved our conversation. Always speak so highly of you. And for those who haven't heard the story of CleanCo, just to add some context to this, where did the idea, or where was that idea given birth to? Like, where did it come from?
It came from a personal desire to fill a gap where I felt there was a lag, there was a space. I had I've described my relationship with alcohol as tempestuous or turbulent, or however you want to look at it. I think I used to be a city trader, and then I worked in nightlife, And then obviously I became a television personality, and it was kind of pretty normal to be drinking, full-strength alcohol, or at least a few beers, quite regularly. And it got in the way of, firstly my kind of personal development, my work drive, and all sorts, really. It's kind of difficult. Well, I found that it was very difficult to have, big audacious goals in life and achieve them with a detrimental relationship with alcohol. So I guess, it's about 5-6 months before Theodore was born, who's our first child. I just thought I'd give sobriety a go, just knocked it on the head and just thought, what's this sober curious movement about, or will it really make that big a difference to my life? And it was kind of instantaneously amazing to me. It's like I'd been living my whole 20s with a handbrake on, and kind of that allowed me to just do certain things that I just wouldn't have bothered to do before. And with all the extra time came just this work drive that, I never really had before. I was at a dinner party one night, and I was offered a non-alcoholic gin and tonic because I'd said that I was sober. And I'd never heard of that before. And I couldn't believe, that I'd never heard of it, didn't know what it was. The brand in question was Seedlip, and it's existed since 2014, but I'd never seen it before. And I had it with tonic, and I was kind of just enthralled by the experience of kind of feeling that you're having a cocktail when you're not. It's sugar-free, and it was a sophisticated experience that really did a good job of filling a void that I'd noticed, because there was just nothing in the way of a replacement to that experience. And it was a kind of complicated product. It didn't necessarily do the job of a gin. It's not juniper-led, and this is no diss to Seedlip at all. They themselves don't call themselves a gin alternative. And I thought, well, why not try and create an actual alternative to gin that's juniper-led with citrus notes and orris root and cardamom and coriander, whatever else you might find in a gin. And then kind of it quickly turned into and rum and tequila and whiskey and vodka. Why is there not alcohol-free spirits? And it just wasn't a thing then. And that kind of quickly consumed me to try and kind of progress that element of non-alc. I'm proud to say that CleanCo is the leading independent non-alcoholic spirits brand in the country now. So
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I had been, when we spoke, 18 months ago, I'd been sober curious, to use your words, for ages. I'd worked in the city as well for a long time, and it had just got too regular. And after we spoke, that was the kind of tipping point for me. And I was sober for initially 9 months, but even when I drank, it wasn't. I think I had one time I went out and I just felt horrendous for about 3 days, and then pretty much been sober ever since. So I noticed a few things. Like, I think the longer I was sober, the better I felt. Yeah. Like I felt an initial surge of energy and just generally felt better about myself. Yeah. And then as the time went on, when I got to that sort of 8-9 months, I just felt incredible. So what was that journey like for you?
It was interesting for me. I think I had a relationship with alcohol that's perhaps similar to some people's, but it certainly wasn't kind of ordinary. So for me, the change was quite vast. And by the way, CleanCo doesn't take an anti-alcohol stance. When we appreciate that people have a great time when they drink alcohol, and if you can do so in moderation, then fantastic. We see ourselves as a brand that definitely coexists with full-strength alcohol, and that's great. So the market for total abstinence is a lot smaller than the market for moderation if you're looking at it as a business. And we just to be completely clear, are not trying to make everybody teetotal. That is definitely not the plan. But yeah, apart from all the obvious, you feel better, you look better. It has a well, I certainly think I feel that you look better than being inebriated as I became accustomed. But I think it's a kind of obvious thing. If it's just the ability to spend more time, proper time with your family, friends, Also it has, you spend less, obviously, if you drink less. But, people think that by cutting alcohol out of your life, you're going to miss out on social occasion. And that's where the brand comes in. So, the whole idea behind clean drinking is to destigmatize not drinking, and make not drinking more accessible, more available, and to make it easier for people to make better decisions when consuming full-strength alcohol, without any of the negativity. Like even the way in which it's phrased, a mocktail sounds like a mockery. A non-alcoholic beer sounds negative and not fun. Even if you order a non-alcoholic beer at a bar, why are you not drinking? There's a kind of stigma. So with the clean living movement and health, and the focus on wellness and health, I thought that calling it clean drinking and CleanCo would be an easier transition for people to not stick out, for making a positive decision negatively, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I don't know if I've done a good job of describing that, but if you're out with your friends and everyone's having a gin and tonic, and you order a Diet Coke, you stick out. Why is he drinking a Diet Coke? Whereas if you have 3 gin and tonics and 2 clean gin and tonics, all of a sudden it's kind of the same. You're just making a decision about how you want your gin and tonic. Then it's like a deep pan pizza versus a thin crust pizza. Maybe you're just being healthier because you're training for something or whatever. So it makes it easier for people to make what can be quite difficult social decisions. I know that a lot of the time, even when I was drinking heavily, there would be nights where I would drink alcohol, even when, like, deep down, you kind of really don't want to. Yeah, and that's just because everyone else is. So yeah, I think it's never been easier. Sorry, I realize I'm doing a lot of talking. It's never been easier, basically, to make better decisions around alcohol, and that's because certain products and some of our good competition have really stepped up the products. Like having a Heineken Zero and a Heineken is a really similar experience now. So the gap between desire and compromise is really minor. And so just to give an example of kind of veganism, if you wanted to be a vegan 10 years ago, it was really hard to be a vegan, right? Like, you fancy a cheeseburger, but you're having a nut roast, and then came Quorn, then the veggie burger, and then now you've got Impossible Meat and Beyond Meat burgers that actually, do a really good job of filling that, desire for a cheeseburger without the meat. And that's essentially what clean cocktails looks to do for alcohol. It's like, I really feel like a gin and tonic, but I'm pregnant, or I'm driving, or I'm busy, or I have a Zoom call, or I don't want my judgment to be clouded, so I'll just have a clean gin and tonic. And the experience and the senses is the same as that alcoholic drink.
You're 100% sober, right? So, because one of the things I get asked the most when I talk about stopping drinking is, so how do you completely go cold turkey? Like, personally, I have had times when I'll have 1 or 2 maybe. Yeah. So how do you deal with, well, I suppose initially, how did you deal with reaction from friends when they said that? And how do you deal with it now? And also then how did you, like, to sort of contrast that? When you then said you were making a business about it, was there a similar kind of reaction to the sobriety, or did that shift the way that people saw that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was terrible at having 1 or 2. So, like, you just said that you went sober for a while and sometimes you'd have 1 or 2. Yeah. Like, for me, I'm a terrible moderator, and for me, I'm savagely ambitious, and I really, there's certain ideas and almost ideals that I've set myself in my life that I want to achieve, and I know that if I drink alcohol, I won't achieve those things. Yeah. And that might be correct, it might not be correct, and that might be relevant to me and nobody else, but that's the way I find it easier to abstain. But I'd say, I use the word abstain just because that's what most people would use in that instance. It's a choice, right? Like, I don't wander past the pub and think, God, I'd really love a drink. Yeah. Like, because I prefer my life without it. So it's not a kind of constant battle that I have to go through. This isn't for me take each day as it comes and, I hope to stay sober. This is just like, I just don't want to drink alcohol.
Has your circle changed at all?
Yeah, but I think I personally think that's completely normal. Like, I'm fascinated by people who have the same friends as when they were 8. You know,
I'm
like that.
envious sometimes.
Yeah, I'm quite envious of it as well. It's just never been the case for me. Like my wife, Vogue, has a group of friends that she's known her entire life, and they haven't gone through life at the same time, and they haven't gone through the same experiences at the same time, and they've, you know, everything points to, you know, them growing apart, but they haven't. They've remained really close, and they have the most different lives, but yet still they're really close. I don't really know. I've made jokes before that, you know, I'm just not like that. And I don't know if I envy it or I don't, but that's never been the case with me. I find that people go through life at different paces, and people mature and develop at different rates. And, you know, why should you be mates with someone who's no longer, you know, the person that you fell in love with or was best friends with when you were 10 or whatever? So I have a group of close friends, but I don't really value having enormous amounts of friends anyway. Do you know what I mean? I think particularly when you're quite busy and you have kids, and, you know, making time for 20 other mates is quite tough anyway. So, you know, your close friends will always be with you, and your close friends will obviously value the positive decisions you make around drinking. I think if you have any friends that have gone off you because you've decided to drink less alcohol, they're probably not, you know, real mates. But again, I'm sure there's situations and circumstances where that's not the case. But yeah, I don't know. You know, I've got a similar group of friends that I've had for the last few years, but there's new additions to that. I'd like to think I'm very close with some of the people I work with. You know, I've only known them for 2 years. So I don't know. I put a lot more emphasis on family, and in some cases business relationships than friends. But I'm a bit odd with that.
No, but I also think your business, similar to mine, is what you equate to your purpose, like why you're here. So then it makes that decision a little bit easier.
Yeah.
One of the things that stuck with me, a lot of the things stuck with me from our conversation, but one that really stood out was when we spoke about shifting habits.
Yeah.
And obviously we were using the alcohol example here, but the perception is that we either drink or we are an alcoholic, essentially.
Yeah.
So you can drink healthily,
Yeah.
or you're addicted. We started to talk about, well, there's a middle ground where it just becomes a bad habit.
Yeah.
And not enough people are conscious enough or aware enough when they stray into that bad habit area.
Yeah.
So how, again, you know, you're not anti-alcohol, but how would you advise people who are perhaps looking to, you know, make a shift and either drink less or change any habit, it doesn't have to be drinking, if it's becoming a little bit of a bad habit?
Yeah, I think if you're developing something that you know to be a bad habit, you know, I personally would advise that the best thing to do is just you know, it sounds obvious, but just stop doing it for a period of time. You know, just like if you're having a cigarette or two, you know, per day, are you really addicted to nicotine? Do you need that cigarette? You know, or is it just something you've become accustomed to doing on your lunch break? You know, or like it's the same with the gin and tonic at 5 p.m. You know, you finish your work day and you come home and you put your feet up. And what's the next thing that I do now that I'm having, you know, a relaxing time at home? Oh, I'll have a glass of wine. You know, those experiences can be replaced now, if you want to, with, you know, an alcohol-free beer or a vape or however you look at it. So I think people, you know, if you take drinking as an example and the pandemic, which obviously nobody was expecting, you know, that really, it didn't, in my opinion, create more alcoholics or you know, what it did was shine a light on people's drinking habits and you know, where you're doing a certain thing. If you were the kind of person to have a beer, you know, after work every day in the city, and all of a sudden you're not going to work at the city, so you're having that beer at home, that beer feels different because you're not being social. It's not the end of a work day. So all of a sudden, that beer could seem more problematic than, you know, having a beer with your workmates. Yeah. So it's kind of like, then you start to question, well, should I be having the beer in the first place? But then should I be having the beer after work? And it's kind of like, it just depends on who you are and whether you want to address these things. You know, I think alcohol's addictive, so smoking. So, you know, there's a fine line, I think, between making poor decisions with your health and being addicted to something. You know, I certainly feel that I would often, or not often per se, but, you know, as I said earlier, I would drink when I didn't necessarily feel like drinking. I would just drink because it was a bad habit. You know, like as a city trader, we would drink, you know, all the time. It was just like, you'd entertain clients, you'd have a beer with lunch, it would just be normal. So, you know, then you take the city trading away, and it's kind of like, are you still going to have that beer every day? So, yeah, I don't really remember your question, but...
You answered it, perfect.
Oh, good, thanks.
So, I was interested, you were talking about the pandemic there. Did that help the business? Did you see, like, did it scale a lot? Did it meet the goals that you were setting for yourself?
I think you had to look at it from all angles, obviously. You know, when we were faced with the pandemic, drinking habits changed, but you know, we had to pay close attention to our plan and what we were doing. Obviously, you know, we had intentions to be in bars, pubs, and restaurants, which, you know, we call the on-trade. We had a primary focus on retail, so off-trade sales, and direct-to-consumer sales, which obviously were less impacted by the pandemic. So that happened to have been our strategy prior to the pandemic, fortunately. But any on-trade activity obviously had to cease. You know, we'd just done a fundraise, so we had to kind of batten down the hatches and just figure out exactly how we were going to spend this money. Are people going to be buying anything other than, you know, loo roll and essentials? You know, is it best that we just freeze the business, you know, until we know what's happening and launch, you know, a bit later? Or, you know, do we change our messaging and our marketing materials to be more around, you know, drinking at home or drinking clean at home, you know, better still? And obviously, it's quite, I can remember feeling that, you know, it may be distasteful to try and sell anything, right? Like at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a huge focus on people's well-being, you know, and how deadly this virus is going to be. So to then say, hey, buy some clean gin, you know, it could have been distasteful. So I remember, you know, having a lot of meetings about whether or not it was right to pursue growth during the pandemic. And actually, it kind of, we saw it as an opportunity is the wrong word, but definitely, you know, a change in culture and a change in people's habits is an interesting time for us to be saying, well, you know, if you feel like you're drinking too much, or you feel like you can't leave your house and that glass of wine's, you know, creeping earlier and earlier into the day, why not have a clean gin and tonic instead? You know, and that kind of obviously the shift to being more D2C focused and less on-premise saw the business grow exponentially, obviously, albeit from a small base.
One of the things that really made me smile in our last chat was when you said, I've always wanted to be a CEO, but that's just weak chat, unless you do it. So how have you developed as a CEO over the last 18 months? Because that was something we could never have perceived happening in anyone's lives.
Well, some of the girls from CleanCo are here, so I better be careful what I say. But I wouldn't say I'm your kind of traditional chief exec. You know, I think I have no real experience prior to running this business. I have no real experience prior to running this business of being an executive kind of at any level. I have very limited Excel spreadsheet capability or PowerPoint capability. But, you know, one thing I think I'm not too bad at is managing a team and being more of a visionary, I suppose, for the brand and, you know, understanding how people can work together. So I'm probably not the best person to ask if I'm a good CEO, I suppose. But I guess it's all relative. You know, we work with a lot of incredible leaders. We did a really exciting deal with the ex-chief exec of Moet Hennessy. He's now our CEO of the Americas. We have some incredible people that have held very high positions at AB InBev and LVMH, and, you know, I feel humbled, you know, when I'm leading certain calls with them on the call. I feel like, do they really feel, you know, that great that they're working with us? And the answer, fortunately, is that, you know, they share the vision. They think that we can make a massive difference, you know, in the world, not necessarily in terms of, you know, progression or saving people, but, you know, giving people options, you know, when it comes to drinking full-strength alcohol or having a very similar experience, you know, clean drinking. And It's fun. You've got to sum up, all kinds of things. I think when you look to when you're leading a business, it's not often, there's no textbook for it. I don't think. Often the way you think it should be done isn't the way it should be done. It's very important, I think, that people are happy, at work. Certainly, we had we restructured the company to make it slightly more, global facing. And having industry-led, and elements of that worked really well, and some bits not so much, So it's important that you just keep a really level head and try not to be too surprised by anything. I think you learn an awful lot. Well, I've certainly learned an awful lot. Being calm and just understanding the cards that you're dealt is pretty important. I think having a level head is probably the most key thing you can have. Through tough times in business.
What do you do to ensure you keep a level head, or at least you're prepared for when things come up that challenge? Because I know we spoke about things like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which you loved.
Love it.
Is there any other practices that help you to be level-headed, or is it just come with experience of running a business?
I think just I'm not the most emotional person, so nothing much kind of shocks me. So I obviously love my family and my kids and stuff, but you'd be hard pressed to say something that kind of derails me. I don't take offense easily, at all. Say whatever you want about me. It'd be like water off a duck's back. I really don't care, and that's not because I don't care what people think about me. It's just because we've got so much other stuff to be kind of worried about, I suppose. So I've got a naturally thick skin, I think, even if we're going to talk about Ghastly made in Chelsea, you needed a really thick skin, right? That was at the very beginning of Twitter, if you don't mind. It makes you feel so old. I remember we watched the first episode and, we'd all have our phones out to see what, people that we've never met thought of us. And it's wild that, we live in a world nowadays where you can just say whatever you want to anyone. I don't need your phone number or your email address. I can just say whatever I want, and it will come straight to your phone. So I think, if you choose to be public-facing or you choose to be on TV, that's something that you need to understand. It definitely doesn't go the way you think it will sometimes. And, I remember we used to film scenes, and it would come out, and it would just be the opposite of what you filmed. What? I'm being absolutely done by. And it was. But anyway, moving off Made in Chelsea. But yeah, so I think that gave me a thick skin, as well as having a natural thick skin, I suppose. But it's certainly interesting, and you look at really successful businesses. And you almost know, and I now kind of know, and by no means am I referring to us as a incredibly successful business. I think we're doing very well in the time that we've had. But you look at really successful businesses, and you just understand that they definitely didn't get there just plain sailing. It's complicated.
Yeah, you have a newfound respect for anyone who's achieved anything.
Oh, yeah. Any business that's absolutely smashed it, you can almost guarantee that was not done through luck. It's a grind.
Something I notice about you, though, which is really nice, is you always seem very light-hearted. You're happy to have fun. Even just over at the bar there, we were just laughing around. You were telling stories, talking about the song.
Oh, yeah. My God. It's amazing.
Is that something that you're aware that you do yourself? Is that something you have as feedback from people that's an energy that you bring?
I think people who know me well kind of know that I'm quite lighthearted. I think it's important to be personable with people and friendly to people. And, I always find it really confusing when people are known or far better known than me. And you ask them for a picture or something, and they just they blow you out of the water and just say, well, what's the point in being horrible to anyone? Anyway, so that's rich coming from some scenes that I've filmed, I know, but I have to say that the tensions were high back in the day. But no, the song that he was talking about that we're referring to was, I've got to talk about it quickly because it's the most amazing thing. So I don't know, has anyone been dished up an advert for Songfinch? I don't know why you're laughing. It's it's the most amazing thing. So I saw And when does this go out? Not before Valentine's Day.
No, like a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
This is live. Okay.
How many people?
Well, maybe I'll tell you all afterwards. Then.
Vogue's listening.
Yeah, exactly. No. Well, Q&A. Yeah, Q&A afterwards. We'll move off topic. Basically, every so often you'll get dealt an ad, right? And like you'll go into it and you'll just think, God, that's an amazing company. And that happened to me the other day. And I bought this product, which I'm going to give my wife on Valentine's Day. And any guys listening to this, it's the best. It's real good. Yeah.
I would love to talk about your marathon subs.
Yes, mate.
Last year. So, in fact, I just recorded a podcast. I'd left the studio and I bumped into you. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Maybe, well, it must have been just after you finished it. And you were on the phone. I was like, oh, hey, mate, how you doing? And I was like, have you been away? Because I've been off social media for, I think, like a couple of months or something.
Yeah.
You'd obviously just got back from doing the Marathon des Arts, which was pretty obvious to everybody else. But what an outstanding achievement. So I'd love to hear the motivation for doing that in the first place. And then just a little bit of some storytelling around what the experience was like would be great.
I mean, it was amazing. And even if you're not a runner, this young lady's husband was there as well. He was in the tent next to me, if you can believe it. What a small world. So usually about 1,200 people do it a year. And it had been delayed for 2 years because of the pandemic. So there was a kind of backlog of people wanting to do it. And as a result of that, the race organizers did it in October for the first time. And that was a mistake of theirs. It was the hottest year on record. The hottest temperature recorded was 59 degrees. So, twice the temperature of a really hot holiday. Yeah. And it's 240, I think it was 244 kilometers in the end, across 5 days in the Sahara Desert.
Yeah. So context: it's a 5-6 day marathon in the desert.
Yes, it's six and a bit marathons across 5 days in the desert, and it's self-sufficient. So you carry all of your food for the week, and if you run out of food, then tough luck. And you carry all your all your stuff, and you had to carry a venom pen just in case you got nailed by some creature that we never saw. So that's all good. And no, it was exciting. You carry your sleeping bag and all your bits and bobs, and no, it was great. And it's not like you run each of the marathons like you would take on the London Marathon. It's kind of it's a bit more, slower pace, I suppose, and it's more a test of mental resilience, I guess, than anything else. I think since being sober, I just find it interesting to set yourself goals that, even I'd rather set myself, an audacious goal that you miss than achieve something that you can achieve easily. I think that's just a way of living. And then if you do manage to achieve the goals, then great. And along the way, we met a ton of really exciting, interesting, kind of like-minded people. But yeah, it was pretty full on. Day 4 was easily. Oh, there was a bug as well. There was a kind of stomach bug that swarmed the camp. So everyone caught it. Yeah. So it wasn't like oh yeah, some people got away with it. Everyone got it. And it was just dire. Like, that just sucked. You know what I mean? Because it's boiling hot. And yeah, I don't need to go into the effects of a stomach bug. I think most people will be aware of what it does. But yeah, that was dreadful. So I had that on the second day. The second day was a kind of long, rolly sand dune day. I got penalized half an hour for needing additional water, which upset me terribly, because I would have been slightly higher up the leaderboard had that not happened. But anyway, I think most people were penalised because most people needed more water at some point because of the stomach bug, and it was great. But day 4 was kind of really cathartic. Like you kind of feel like you're going a bit crazy. I was like talking to myself, and I didn't have any music or anything. Day 4 was 82.5 kilometers in a single stint. And yeah, it was boiling hot, and then it was kind of all of a sudden it's like the middle of the night, big mountain to climb, and it's just like you get to like the very end of where you think your body can go, and you've got like 30 kilometers left. It's just like, it kind of sucked. Getting to the end of that day, you kind of knew that you'd done it. You had a marathon the following day, and then a kind of another one the day after. But yeah, it was great. I don't know. I find putting yourself through physical endeavors like that just to be a kind of wake-up call of some kind. I don't really know why, like, I'm attracted to it, but I just like it. I want to row the Atlantic, and I've got more of these ultras coming up, and I think it's also a reflection of, for me at least, like, what you can do with your life now that you're sober. And that's not me saying like, oh, sober up and you can do cool things. That's just for me, right? It's just like, I lost so many hours, days, weeks, whatever, aimlessly socializing, and I'm not saying it wasn't fun, but I guess I've just unlocked a kind of gear in my life that perhaps I didn't have before, and it's nice to use the gear. It's like discovering that you've got a cool car, but actually it can go way faster, and it's like, I like pressing the button that makes it go faster.
I'm interested to know what happened on day 4, like what's going through your mind, and how do you push through that? Like, and actually, a terrible habit, shouldn't stack questions, but what did you get from the whole experience? So what was going through your mind day 4, and what was that cathartic moment? And then what was really the thing that you took from the whole experience?
I realized that the race is kind of, day 4 was the most important day. I was kind of hovering around just outside the top 100 of the 780 people, I think, that did it, going into day 4. And I knew that day 4 was going to be a killer. Shouldn't say that because someone did die on the second day. But I knew that day 4 would be a real tough one. and essentially, like, I also knew that, so day 4 had the most checkpoints. I think there were 6 or 7 checkpoints. And I knew that most people would stop at the checkpoints for, call it an average of 10, 15 minutes. So I knew that there was a whole hour to be gained by not stopping at the checkpoints. And actually, I found stopping at the checkpoints and losing the temperature and settling down and, taking on some food and stuff could actually, it was quite hard to get going again. So I just took the strategy of just head down and just kind of fast march. Like, I did very little running that day. I just like really got in the zone of just moving forward. And I didn't stop at any of the checkpoints. You'd take water, you'd load up, and I'd just eat like as I was going. So I saved about an hour, and I came 33rd on that day, which was epic. And that was, to me, was my biggest achievement, basically, in that time. And I just loved it. I found myself talking to my brother passed away on Mount Everest many years ago. He was the youngest Brit to reach the summit of Mount Everest. This is back, in 2001. His name was Michael Matthews, and I'm not a particularly religious person, but I suppose that's made me more spiritual. Like, I'll credit incredible things that are lucky, I suppose, that happen in my life to him helping me. Or if there's like, a time where I feel like I really can't go on, but I do anyway, like that last gear, like I credit that to being him. I found myself talking to him, on like mile 50 or whatever, really like deep into the race when you're losing light, and it was just becoming a real drain physically.
What do you say?
I was, it kind of feels, I was kind of asking him just to see me through it, to like, because I think when you go all that way and you give up, and this is no disrespect to those that did give up, about 60% of people that entered the race didn't finish it, but you've gone such a long way, right? I've flown all the way to bloody the Sahara Desert to do it, so to give up, like, it was a decision that, I just don't think you would take lightly. Of course, some people had to give up, and some people's feet didn't hold up, but, it's just, you kind of know that you've got to crack on with it. And at times that was pretty hard. Like, particularly on the long day took me 14 hours and 40 minutes of just continuous moving. So yeah, you're kind of pretty drained by the end of it. I got given a cup of that delicious Moroccan tea at the end. And like, I could just remember it being like the best thing ever. Like, it was amazing. But yeah, I don't know. You know, I was just asking him for strength. You know, I felt like the guy from you know, Daniel Day-Lewis's character in There Will Be Blood, where he's screaming like, "Give me the strength, Lord!" You know, like I kind of felt like him, just like shouting aimlessly at nobody.
No, amazing. Let's raise a glass for Spencer for completing that. It's unbelievable achievement.
Yeah, thanks very much.
What a mate.
Cheers.
What's your fitness regime look like now? I know you're fitness mad. You've done your charity boxing matches. We were talking about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before.
Yeah.
What's your regime look like at the moment?
I do a lot of you know, quite fairly long distance running, I suppose. But you know, I think to anyone who's looking to get into running, you don't have to run to the point where your heart's thumping through your rib cage and you feel really uncomfortable. Just go for like a nice, long, slow run. Like, it's really nice for your like peace of mind as well. Just like, if you can, lace up your shoes and try going for like an hour or like an hour and a half. Really slow run, like just slightly faster than a walk. You know, and you'll find that like you start to cover some really nice like distance without any real effort. You know, you'll get home and you won't hurt and you won't be sweating profusely and you won't be like coughing. You know, it's just a nice way, firstly, to just, well, anyway, some people like running, some people don't like running, but my point is you can just start really light and like you'll start to see that you can cover some proper distance. So I do a lot of that. Like, I'll go running for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But like, again, it's nothing kind of uber aggressive. It's just, you know, long, slow runs. I'll listen to podcasts whilst I do it, or I'll even take the odd call, you know, just clear your mind. And I lift weights as well, and I do jiu-jitsu. Yeah. So yeah, I try just to kind of exercise a you know, normal amount. It's nice to get away from work, and you know, although I love my personal life at home, it is just nice to get to the gym. I think it's very good for your mental health.
Yeah, sanctuary.
Yeah.
Final question before we go to some questions. So get ready, guys, if you've got any questions. How are you finding balancing it all now? So we spoke about this before as well.
Yeah.
So especially with the third on the way, fitness, health and wellness, the ever-growing company, and just you having your own time. Like, what have you found in the last 18 months that's helped you to find success in all of those areas?
I think just you know, making a real effort to include, like, well, in my case, my wife in my thought process is really helpful. Like, I for many years just thought I could do everything on my own, you know, and I don't need any help. And you know, I was kind of, I guess you could have confused my natural confidence with arrogance, although I'm sure there was some arrogance as well. But you know, I think now, as long as I explain my feelings, like how I'm feeling, to my wife, she gets it. And she's super busy as well, by the way. My wife is incredibly successful and doesn't need me, and you know, is a completely career-orientated woman in her own right. So, you know, as long as we're just open and honest with each other, with what we're doing and what we have on, and, you know, I have a tendency to mask how I'm feeling and suppress, you know, emotion. So if I'm going through, you know, what could potentially be a traumatic experience with like a fundraise, and that's just an example, you know, we're, touch wood, doing great, you know, on the fundraising side of things. But, you know, it hasn't always been rosy, or, you know, somebody just really lets you down. And it could manifest, you know, the suppressing of the emotions can manifest itself, you know, in detrimental ways. If I'm completely honest with my wife, everything is fine. If I wake up and I just say, look, you know, it'd be amazing if this happened, but if it doesn't happen, you know, these are the potential setbacks that I can face, you know, in my business. This is the responsibility that I have, and these are the people that I could let down, you know, if I'm not successful in what it is that I'm trying to achieve, you know, this week. You know, it could have all these negative effects. She'll then completely understand why I have to take an hour-long phone call on a Sunday, you know, whereas like before I'd just be like, everything's fine, like, don't worry about it, things are great. Oh, you're supposed to be taking Theodore swimming. Oh no, I can't, I'm talking to Jim for an hour. She's like, well, why are you talking to Jim? It's a Sunday. You know, whereas like if I just and it's the same goes for her, but, I guess, but it's, yeah, sorry, long story short, I guess just being super honest with your partner really helps.
No,
And including them in your thought process, and fortunately Vogue is, the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. There's absolutely no pressure from her for me to be any different, so always good.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant advice. Thank you, mate. Anyone got any questions? Does anyone?
We've got a question online.
Okay. Is that from?
Online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. When you're on your meetings with these other influential people, obviously you started this company. How do you ever get the feeling of imposter syndrome and you doubt yourself on it at all? And how do you get through that to go, no, actually, I can do this and this is what I'm meant to be doing?
So when we started working with these other kind of industry-leading pros, is that what you're saying?
How did you overcome, if you had any feeling of imposter syndrome, and how did you overcome any self-doubt?
Absolutely, like it was rife to begin with. The feeling of they know what they're doing more so than me, absolutely was a feeling. The only thing you can rely on is the fact that you founded the business, right? And that it's your idea and that it's your vision. So just try. Unfortunately, my partners don't try and take that away from me. But I find, and this, might sound odd, but just trying to almost be overly modest with them helps. Just saying, listen, I know that you've got 20 years of experience working at Diageo, but, actually, I feel that maybe we should do things this way, and, this is why I think that. As long as you kind of preface stuff with that, I think, the more bullish you are in general, and the more sure of yourself you are in general, the less well it's going to go down with people with more experience. So, I don't know, I find myself often just saying, this is very much your area of expertise, but, if I were to question it, this is what I would do differently. And often I think you'll find that people are quite open to being collaborative if it's approached properly. But yeah, absolutely, like when we first started and we were doing deals with, the Moe and LVMH guys, I was just like, what am I doing on this call? But then you remember that it's your business and that's what you're doing on the call.
Nice. Any other questions in the room?
Here he is.
There we go. So yeah, founders typically go two ways in their way of, like when they're beginning something, like starting a new a business. They normally either talk about like overtly to people about what they're doing and everything like that, what they're strategizing when they're launching stuff, or they keep it completely internal within a very like close network. Which way did you sort of lean to?
I was pretty vocal.
Yeah.
But that came with, I think I've always hoped that, the kind of TV thing was never meant to be a career for me. I worked as a city broker, as I said, and then the Made in Chelsea thing came around, and I thought this could be a fun opportunity to see if this works, and then, potentially leverage that by doing, something else. It was never, I think if again, no disrespect to professional reality TV stars, I suppose, but that was never my intention to stick in that space. And actually, I think I was in it for, a lot longer than perhaps I should have been. So the idea was always to, I suppose, if any kind of following was amassed, and to use that proactively in the form of creating something that potentially those people could buy into and enjoy. And if you can help someone to change their life along the way, then great. So yeah, I think in the really early days, I was pretty dependent on social media and my following, and Vogue and her voice, which I think people prefer to mine. So yeah, it was. I was keen to get it out there. I know what you mean, though, in the sense that, like,
More like accountability.
Yeah.
Something like that way.
I spoke to a few. It was a double-edged thing, I spoke to a few key people who I thought might be able to help me without blowing the roof off it, because I think as well you'll always find, or particularly in my experience of dealing with other founders or investments that I've made, they always think their idea is the best idea, so don't tell anyone, and it's kind of like they always want to keep a bit of a lid on it. They always put some big valuation on it, and everyone will, but I think that's great, to have confidence in what you're doing and to think that you're going to be, trailblaze into some territory that's never been done before. That's great, and I think if you don't start your project enthusiastically, then, what chance have you got?
There's a quote that says, the first over the wall gets the bloodiest. So there are companies that have been created that are been created before, like talent agencies, marketing agencies, whatever, right? So that might be easier to, well, it could go both ways, right? But that could be easier to keep to yourself. When you're trailblazing or creating something that is in a new industry, then maybe you need to talk about it a little bit more to get more feelers and more feedback or data.
Yeah, I think, well, as well, there's the earlier you are into something, the more of an education piece that comes with it, and that's really time consuming. So like even like famous brands like Aperol, people still don't know how to make an Aperol Spritz, but everyone, someone that we work with was very high up in Aperol and kind of spearheaded their marketing, and she said like for years and years and years and years, she's drilled into people how to make an Aperol Spritz, and very few people make an Aperol Spritz at home. So it's kind of, Aperol was a brand new thing. This is kind of new now. Obviously, with Gordon Zero and Tanqueray coming in, we've had to shift a lot of our, let's bring as many eyes to the market as possible to, right, okay, the eyes are being brought in by the big boys. How do we steal back market share? How do we make ourselves more premium? How do we make ourselves better than them? And how do we persuade people to buy us instead of household Diageo names? So there's been certainly a shift.
Before we go, you still got your question here? Yeah.
We've got a question online just quickly, and apologies if I get this name wrong, but this is from Onua. Spencer, obviously you were very mentally resilient before doing the race, so that's why you took on the challenge. But how different do you think you are now post-race? Have you noticed any changes within yourself? They also go on to say huge respect for doing it, by the way.
Thank you very much. I definitely felt more humble when I got back, but I suppose that humility could have worn off. I don't really know, because like for the whole week that you're there, if you think about it, there's no refrigeration, right? There's no electricity, so you don't have any cold water, like little luxuries. There's no toilets, there's no beds, so you're sleeping rough. You've got no cold water. All the water you're drinking is like really, really hot, right, from the like 55-degree days that you're running in. And it's like, I don't know if you've taken like a sip out of, a water bottle when it's really, really, really hot. It's horrible, right? And that's kind of what you're drinking the whole time. And yeah, so I guess you come back, and I was probably, you're immediately more grateful for everything you take for granted. And I know that sounds, but it's true. You get back and there's a piping hot shower and a toilet and a fridge with nice food in it and chocolates and just stuff that you haven't had. I was eating dried food out of bags, and there's no boiling water either, so you're using this kind of tepid water, so it's not quite doing the job of cooking the dry food, so it's kind of crunchy, but it's not hot either. So yeah, in other words, like the week is violently ghastly, but it makes for a more exciting and interesting experience, I suppose.
My question was, so given obviously you've got such a huge role to fill as CEO, where do you get your guidance from?
I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of people who would probably be a much better CEO than me. So we have a number of kind of people across the we've structured the business so that it's led essentially by a global executive committee, and there's 5 people on that. So I very rarely have to make decisions completely on my own. As I said, I like to think that I gel people together, and that hopefully we keep morale high in the team and keep everyone excited about delivering the dream. but yeah, as I said, I'd be crazy not to take, at least a lead or a leaf out of, Jim Clerkin's book, he was the CEO at Moet Hennessy, and before that he was the CEO at Jim Beam, and before that he was the youngest CEO of Guinness. So, he has all the experience in the world, executively, and that's just him. Then, I work with a great guy called Justin Hicklin, who's had his own businesses for many years. He's in his 60s, and I think that there's so many sound people who work at Clean, and I'm very fortunate to be working with them. A big part of growing the business was to try and create a kind of really industry-beating kind of, almost unfair advantage team, in this small space, just to ensure that we are making the right decisions. That wasn't always the case, obviously. So right at the very beginning, of course, it was just me, and then there was a team of 3, and teams grow. But we also have a board, to kind of lead, and we take advice from them and our investors, of course, and shareholders. So it's long gone are the days of shooting from the hip and making decisions on my own.
Cool, thanks. Sorry, is it on? Thank you.
What's your relationship to? Did you say Jim? Is it Jim?
Jim, yeah.
What's your relationship to him? Is it like a mentor-mentee kind of, or is it not an official?
No, he's our CEO of the Americas. So he's a partner.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
Partner, shareholder, and he's business partner, shareholder, and friend. I see Jim as, I hope he doesn't hear this because he's already got a big ego. But I see Jim as, absolutely as a mentor. If I'm struggling with a tough decision with Clean, I will turn to him and Justin Hicklin. And actually, I like having, proper, good sound people around me, because it just reassures your thought process a lot of the time.
And how would you advise people to get the right people around them?
I guess, if you can, if you are starting a business, try and value it appropriately to, the dream that you have. It's so often that you see businesses that are kind of underfunded from the start, so you might not be able to make the hires that you really want to. And I think if you're cutting corners at a base level, right at the very beginning, it's going to be really hard to achieve, the plan that you create. So if you are able to surround yourself, with good people early and make key hires early on, it's going to save you a lot of heartache later on. And by the way, we were by no means perfect at that. But, I think the US team in particular, Jim helped us with that, and Jim created this team that's in the US that, and we have the most incredible team in the UK now as well, but it kind of took us a while to get there, whereas the US just launched, boom, with, a solid structure straight away. So that's just a lack of experience, though, from us in the early days.
Any other questions in the room? Yes.
You've always been in the public eye, whether that's through Made in Chelsea or having kind of your name associated with this brand. Do you think that's created more pressure for you around making mistakes in your life and in the business world as well?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I think the business might not have got the start that we did get if it wasn't for having done certain things in the public eye. But then I suppose, I can't say what the public perception of me is, really. I feel like it's changed with time as people grow and evolve. I think I hope at least that my image has changed with that. I think it would have been very difficult to have taken the early iterations of me seriously. I've always been quite kind of open and honest with my feelings, of all my heart on my sleeve, and sometimes that would have probably upset people in the filming of some shows. But yeah, I think just as life progresses and it goes on, I think it's helpful if you are in the public eye for business. I think naturally having access to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, who can see and hear what you have to say almost immediately is clearly a benefit to business. Whether or not your image is detrimental to that is something entirely different. But I think that for some time now I've been kind of the person that I'd like to be seen as. Every so often you get someone that forgets that time moves on. but you know, I think if we all spent time really regretting, you know, our behavior from our early 20s, we'd all be accountable, I suppose, to use your word. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks so much. I love seeing the impact that you're having, mate, and good luck with all the success in the future.
Thanks so much
Guys,
for having me.
Spencer Matthews.
Great pleasure.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you. Cheers.